Well, welcome to Thought for the Day on a rather murky Tuesday morning. I've been reading over the last few weeks the account of Abraham's life, Abraham and Sarah, lives that were utterly transformed quite late in life. They were both getting on in years, and God called them, and gave them an incredible promise. Called them to leave their country, their people, their home, leave everything, and go where He would show them. He didn't even tell them at that stage where it was. He said, "Just go, I'll lead you." And He gave them an amazing promise that He'd bless them, that they would become the ancestors of a great nation, and all nations in the world would be blessed through him. An extraordinary promise, an extraordinary call, an extraordinary promise. And from that point on, their whole life and the whole story, the whole account centres on that promise. That promise that they would become the ancestors of a great nation, even though at this stage, even quite late in life, they have no children. And God has to reinforce the promise. It's first given in chapter 12. He then reiterates it with a covenant in chapter 15, and again in chapter 17. God is saying, "I am promising you. I am promising you." And the fascinating thing I've been noticing is that they really don't get everything right. In fact, they do almost everything wrong. First, Abraham is told to leave his family, but he actually takes Lot, his nephew, with him. If you know the story, you'll know that taking Lot with him doesn't end well. Lots of very unpleasant things happen as a result of that. That doesn't end well. Twice, Abraham tries to save his skin by basically risking Sarah getting married to a foreign king. He pretends she's his sister so that the king can marry her. Terrible thing to do. Both times, God digs him out of the mess. The king sort of God shows that the king involved that something is wrong, and Abraham comes out of it better, even though it was Abraham who made all the mistakes. It's a very strange thing that goes on. Then Abraham tries to get a child the wrong way by getting his wife to give him one of her maidservants. That doesn't end well either. It's arguable that the implication, the kind of results of that are still around in our world today. And then as the promise of a child gets nearer, both first Abraham and then Sarah laugh at the idea. And in God's wonderful sense of humour, sense of timing, the name that He gives to that child is Isaac, which means laughter. The child that will bring laughter to their faces, but actually the possibility of whom they laughed at, is called laughter. God, I think, has a sense of humour too. But then, finally, the time comes, and the promised child, Isaac, is born. And the account of that happening starts this way. It says, "Now the Lord was gracious to Sarah as He had said, and the Lord did for Sarah as He had promised." And it's as if that whole story, all Abraham's and Sarah's sort of missteps, going off in the wrong direction, God making sure, "Now I'm going to keep my promise despite your fears. I'm going to keep my promise despite the fact that you've tried to do it your own way. I'm going to keep my promise." It's all wrapped up. The Lord was gracious to Sarah, as He'd said. He was gracious to them. That's how God is with us. He's gracious to us, as He'd said, despite all the times we mess up. The Lord did for Sarah as He had promised. That's God's grace, doing exactly what He's promised. And it's that verse that I read last Friday, that when I made my last thought for the day about the time I was really down and God lifted me. And of course God lifted me, as if you've heard my last thought for the day, you'll know, through reminding me that there is a hope. Reminding me that there is a secure future, that I can trust his promises, and that living with him isn't a matter of getting everything right, but simply living in the light of his promises, holding on to them. Glimpsing again God's promises is what lifted me out of the pit that I was in last Thursday. I pray it'll do the same for you. God bless.